So we want to hear the story how William Kennedy of Albany got together with Francis Ford Coppola on this film, because as you see in the credits, Mario Puzo did the first script or first version. How did Bill get involved?
Well, Mario did a script, and Mario was just a wonderful person. And Mario, of course, was involved on The Godfather, but I never worked with Mario on this project, and his script for the Cotton Club was nothing like this.
No, it's a battle of the bands. It's a battle of the bands. I never read it, so I don't know.
Yeah,
there were four of his scripts.
It was a script that was an earlier script. Originally, Bob Evans, who is our producer, was going to direct this project, and he had, I guess maybe partly because of the success of the gangster picture, The Godfather, he had engaged Mario to do it, and Mario's script was not really anything like this whatsoever. He did it, but the real well, there's a very long story. We're not going to spend the hours it could take to discuss this, but try to get just to the good parts.
But did he call you up, Bill, or how did you find each other?
You wrote two scripts before you came to New York, or at least the second one you were still working on.
I had written the first script based on this idea of the problem with how it came to my attention was just I got a phone call from Bob Evans, who said, I have a problem with my child. And I thought at first it was his kid. And I had a pretty contentious relationship with Bob Evans, but if someone calls you up and says, I need your help for my kid, you do it. And it turned out that what he meant was his project, the Cotton Club, that he was going to direct. So he basically wanted my opinion of how he could get out of the pickle. And the pickle was this: he had hired Gregory Hines, and he had hired Richard Gere, and Richard Gere absolutely, was that me? No. Would absolutely not play a gangster. He wanted to play a cornet player because he did play the cornet, but the Cotton Club Orchestra never had ever a white musician in that band. All the talent of the Cotton Club were African Americans. So the problem was, how could you make a story if one of the actors would not play anything but a musician? And that was the first thing I tried to come up with a solution. And my solution was that they both lived in Harlem, and therefore they could crisscross, and their stories might. I took some reference from George Raft, who had been, he was not a gangster, but he was sort of affiliated with gangsters, and he became a Hollywood star, but he did have that connection, and I thought maybe Richard Gere's character.
He was a very close friend of Oni Madden's, and Oni Madden sponsored him in the movie business. And that was similar.
I tossed out this idea of a possible way to do it, and basically Bob Evans kept enlarging what he wanted me to do, and I didn't want to be involved. I didn't want to be involved again in what had not been but nonetheless, the real reason of why he wanted me is because they didn't have financing for the movie, and they thought that if they got, Bob Evans, Mario Puzo, and Francis Coppola together, they could get financing. That was the real reason I was suckered in. And I was absolutely resistant of not wanting to do it because, I had felt that on the first Godfather, it was such a war between us. And, I want to say now that, Bob Evans, he was the producer of this film, and I really want to honor him for his, I had my hands full with him, but he's not a man without talent. And if not for Bob Evans, this story, Richard Gere and Gregory Hines and some of the wonderful talent assembled, certainly this extraordinary show business talent who was the cast of the actual Cotton Club, is the work of Bob Evans. And
yeah, but I remember when he came into the office one day, and you really had a showdown, a screaming match, and and you were you were not getting your whatever you wanted, and he was still harassing you in a certain way.
Yeah, like I had said, okay, finally in the end, I'll do it, but it's absolutely, I am responsible for it. Do not second guess me.
Yeah, but at this point, you said everything. He said okay, and he didn't show up for a long time. And then you still weren't getting your money, or I've forgotten what the deal was.
Well, the first issue is when I cast Fred Gwynne, and he just absolutely was outraged. I will not have a monster in the movie. And I began to see that it was going to. But I don't want to continue this story. I mean.
Wait a minute. Let me tell you just one element here. After Bob Evans came in that day, on the way out, he said, past my desk and said, "Hi, I loved your book." I didn't know what book he was talking about. I'd written about 5 at that time, I think, but it was a very strange attitude he had, and what he had done was kept me secret, because he didn't want anybody to know that there was another writer on the film, because of what you just said. It was going to be Puzo, Evans, and Coppola, the 3 people who gave you The Godfather. And if Kennedy got in there in some way, it was going to be. And so the publicity guy was told not to publicize me. They didn't even put my name in the telephone directory for the set. So.
Well, the way you did get into it was that I invited you.
Yeah, sure, you got. This was long after you invited me.
I had thought that Bill's work was so wonderful that he would, be someone to talk to and to improve it, which of course we did. So we worked on it. I had a screenplay, but I wanted it to be better, and because of Bill, he made it better, and we made it together.
Yes.
Together we did it.
Yes, big applause there.
It was a wonderful collaboration. But I do want to say one thing about Bob Evans. I'm at the age now, I'm 80, and I look at everyone I know as my friends. And as I said before, Bob Evans is a man with a lot of talent. He's a very interesting guy, and he made some wonderful films throughout his career, and several that I was involved with. So I want to honor him today.
He said something very gracious in the Vanity Fair article. He said it's a beautiful film and you are a master, but he also said there are 3 versions of the truth, and there's been a lot of versions swirling around how this movie was made. But I'd like to hear about your process, these marathons, when you would write 5 versions in 48 hours. Did you sit side by side at a typewriter?
The first thing was that we sat down when we finally got together. We were in this suite of rooms up in the Astoria studio where the Marx Brothers and Gloria Swanson and a lot of other people had used these places as dressing rooms. And Francis was living there. And I had an office off to the right and with a typewriter, and he had his typewriter and his board with all the every scene laid out on the board. What we did was, when we just sat down and we talked for like a day or 2 and hardly wrote anything, just designing what we were going to do to change the plot, because there were a lot of reasons. There were a lot of scenes that were just like designated scenes. Here comes Sandman, and he's going to go up and check out whether they got the job or not, and that's it. I mean, it was more like a treatment in certain ways, so we had to fill in a lot of blanks, and there were a lot of things that we came up with as we talked, and we had to do it fast because Francis was going into rehearsal. In like 5 days or something like that. And we didn't have very much time.
Also, there's a sort of amusing and telling aspect to it, because also we had to make the budget get smaller because there was a budget of the very first script that I had done, and we had to cut it down, and so we did. We worked on it, and we made it sure we cut things. Say the budget was, I don't know, $18 million.
No, wait a minute. It was 57 million that they said, and we had to cut that back to.
We had to cut it, so we did, and we actually did a rewrite in which we cut things out, and we cut things out.
We cut $29 million out.
But when we did that, and we really did cut stuff, and they did an assessment of the budget, it went up $15 million. So every time we kept, and we would really cut, then I would say, well, let's go back to the old script. They said, no, we can't do that because, but what had happened, which happens with contractors and houses, is that the budget that they had been talking about was really phony. So now that there was really a script, any script would make the budget go up, because the budget was never on the level. So the more we cut and the more we made it more efficient, the more they said the budget had gone up. So that was one of the reasons why we kept doing rewrites and doing rewrites, and we kept doing rewrites, and finally I realized the budget is never going to go down because the budget was fake.
But when we got rid of 28 million at one weekend, I think it was, we were back down to 29 or 30, 31, whatever it was. And I was very proud because you and I had just saved this whole operation, $29 million for forever, you know. But however that escalation came, there was another moment when everybody was complaining that the script was too long. And it was like 10 pages, 15 pages, over 120 pages, which is normal. And so I remember Anahid and I were working together one night, and I took the script and I took out all the widows, and I condensed every piece of description. I cut the dialogue back a little bit here and there, but I didn't change much of anything, and I just edited, and I got it down to 120 pages, and then they stopped talking about it, and I hadn't changed anything. I hadn't changed the script at all. I mean, to speak of, it was just a grammarian at work.
Well, you know, basically about the Cotton Club, there was more going on than really I knew and you knew, because it really wasn't financed, and eventually various people, very suspicious people, came involved in the financing. And as you know, if there was a murder, and there was, I mean, it was an extraordinary atmosphere to be making a movie and going on at the same time that we were making the movie. And a lot of these unknown things had their effect on us, because weird things would happen, and suddenly a strange guy was sitting on the set and he was going to watch everything. And
Joey Cusimano.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story, because
That's a great story.
Because he was really sent by some of the financiers to make sure that no one fooled around.
This was a guy from Las Vegas, and he
was from Chicago.
He was, but he was associated with Tony Spilotro.
Well, we shouldn't talk too much about
everybody knew it. I think
the
statute of limitations.
But the amusing,
I think it was in the New York Magazine.
The amusing and the ironic thing is that this mysterious person looked at what was going on and took our side and protected us throughout the whole movie. So these things, the cookie crumbles many ways.
I remember that when he first came in, Francis worked in a trailer that he calls the Silverfish, and he had this inside on the set in Astoria Studios, right in the middle of the Cotton Club, and he was directing from there sometimes. And I remember Joey, in his first days or something, somebody asked him, "What a friend you had get out by Christmas Eve out of your shooting in the Grand Central Station, or you were going to cost somebody a lot of money, and the contract would be broken or something. You had to get out, which you did, right on the money. And Joey said, well, if he doesn't get out on the 24th, that silverfish is going into the river with all the other fish.
but in truth,
but then later on, I can remember Joey telling me that, he said, they shouldn't be criticizing Francis. Francis is cutting the budget all the time. He's saving money all the way along. And I didn't realize that he had capitulated away from whoever it was in Las Vegas who had sent him. But it was you had totally won him over as a partner.
He made the choice. He was looking, and he thought that we were trying to make a good movie, and he protected us.
Yeah.
I didn't know that he would do that, but he did. And without him, I don't know that the movie would have really gotten done.
They had somebody else before him, somebody who was...
Many different people connected with it. It was crazy. It is a miracle, and I think it's a victory of the young talent and the talent who were in the movie. They were so irrepressibly wonderful. All of the Cotton Club beauties. They were the nicest young ladies you would ever meet, and the kindest and the most ladylike. All the cast, all the performers. We were surrounded by talent.
It was great,
Let me ask you, when it got down to the words on a page, there's some lines there that just crackle, like, this isn't life, it's jazz. I'm thinking of just certain lines that just pop. Who can get credit for those? Were you editing each other? Because you started as a writer, you got your first Oscar on Patton.
Most of the really good lines were written by Bill.
All right, you heard it here.
And the good dialogue. One of my favorite parts is when Dixie and Vera say goodbye, and she doesn't know yet that Dutch is dead, and she says, "Just kiss me on my lovely lips and say goodbye, and maybe we'll see each other, maybe we'll make love." And she's my very, very lover, and she leaves. And that was, I remember very much, a beautiful speech. I didn't do it in its entirety or well, but he wrote it.
That's Bill Kennedy from North Albany. So did writing Legs and everything you knew about gangsters and...
Well, it was Legs that I had read that made me reach out to Bill.
Yeah, when I wrote about Legs Diamond, and I got to know all about Oni Madden, and Dutch Schultz had a war with Legs Diamond. But Legs Diamond didn't have very much to do with the Cotton Club. I mean,
that's how I became aware of that I could reach out to you.
And there was so much I got into, and people I knew who were in the Hispanic mob in New York, and they knew Bumpy Johnson very well. And I never heard of Bumpy Johnson until...
Bumpy was played by Laurence Fishburne.
Larry Fishburne, yeah. He he was a very strong leader in Harlem at that time of the mob. Anyway.
So when you talk about the
writing...
the writing, did you just work over the words, or you would start a draft and he would finish it?
The way we always worked is like he would write the whole first half and I would write the second half, and then we would get together and see what we had learned. Then I would write the second half, and he would, we always just kind of did a section of screenplay, but with a lot of talk.
What we did at first was when we were trying to get him a rehearsal draft. We had like 8 days, and then it got down to about like 3 days. And so one weekend we spent like 34 hours without sleep. And I remember Francis saying, "This is the death trip. This is the death trip we're on." And but we did 5 scripts that weekend. 5. I mean, when this was cutting and pasting and...
Think of what a laptop would have
changing,
done for your lives.
And then,
You could technology would have saved you.
Many things in life based on...
After a while, he had to leave and go direct the movie. And
The ink was still wet, it sounded like.
I was upstairs typing, writing it. He'd come back, and we'd always have a meeting every night and talk about what was necessary or sometimes my homework was to, do 5 or 6 scenes, and maybe we'd go a couple of days without having a conference. But when we had a conference, we always played Duke Ellington and started with Mood Indigo.
Have you ever done another movie like that? This seems like right on the edge with rewrites.
I've worked on a lot of movies, and all of them I pretty much did the screenplays, and sometimes with a wonderful collaborator. My collaboration with Mario Puzo was very enjoyable. My collaboration with Bill was very enjoyable, with the young lady who wrote The Outsiders. That was very, so I have had wonderful collaborations, and I've also worked on scripts where I didn't have anyone, and I've worked on scripts where other people wrote the entire script. Tucker, for one.
You had, one of the things that I was reading about you last night, and I didn't realize that you used the word redemption before, and there was always you always come to the moment of redemption. You did it with, the Cotton Club, obviously. This is the redemption, this is great. But in Patton, they put your script aside, and when they were talking to Burt Lancaster about it, and he didn't like the way you opened the movie with a speech by Patton.
The beginning.
Yeah, and then when George C. Scott came in, somebody remembered your script and gave it. He didn't like the script that Burt Lancaster wanted, and they gave him your script, and that was the script that was used. I mean, and that was how it worked out. And then the Godfather, the first Godfather, you were almost fired over and over and again by Evans, I presume, and then suddenly this incredible movie comes out, and you are justified in so many ways. And in Apocalypse Now, when everybody is down on you, and this is going to be the most expensive disaster of the last 5, 10, 20 years, or whatever it was.
40 years.
And you took
40 years.
40 years. You took the film to Cannes, and you won the Palme d'Or.
When it was unfinished.
Yeah, unfinished movie.
But I had to, because there was so much bad publicity about it that it was starting to damn the film, and no one had ever seen it, and it wasn't finished. But I remember that James Joyce had, people knew about Finnegan's Wake because they called it a work in progress. So my idea was to just go to Cannes with the unfinished Apocalypse Now work in progress. And I just wanted to show it so that they would stop imagining what a disaster it was, and then surprisingly we won the prize with it. So,
do you remember putting Joyce in our movie? This movie, James Joyce. Do you remember putting him into it? We talked about this, and my point was that you can't get Ulysses on film. I mean, without making 400 movies, 500 or 600, you can make a movie out of 1/2 of a page of Joyce. But you said, all right, let's put Joyce in the movie.
As what? As a character?
And so Tony Dingman was around, who worked for Francis, and you said to Tony, he's a poet, and among other things, and you said to him, pick something out of Ulysses, and we'll put it in the movie. And so he went to the seaside. The song, those girls, those seaside girls, and it's the it's the scene where he sees this girl, young girl from in the distance, and he gets very aroused, and so does she, and it's one of the great scenes in literature. But so we created a song, or we played that song, and I was going to play somebody. I was going to play the groom at a wedding, I think, and it was the girls, and that song was going to be sung to me. Or
we had that. We had that in the script.
We had it in the script.
Maybe Bob Evans was right, and we were crazy.
They saved 29 million when they took it back out, maybe.
Well, it only lasted about 3 days, and I came in and it was out of the script, and then we never talked about it until now again.
Well, you know, writing.
I could have been a star.
Writing a script is like many things in life. It's based on respiration. In other words, you put everything in the script and you make it bigger and bigger and bigger, like taking a breath in. And then you look at it and say, my God, we've got to now shrink it. And then you exhale it and you throw out a lot of stuff. And then you take that and then you inhale and you make it bigger. So it's constantly getting bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller. But each time it does, it brings in new things and it excludes old things. So after so many rewrites, you really have a new script. But that's a lot of what we did. We would make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and then we would squeeze it and do the butcher paper version and cut everything down as much as we could. But in that process of being big and small and big and small, eventually you get equilibrium of some type.
Do you remember when you were getting ready you were at an impasse with Evans, and you decided you had threatened to leave and leave the project, and suddenly you said, okay, I'm going to London.
No, I did leave it.
I know, I remember, but do you remember how you left the script the night before? That was really, when I went to work, you said to me, give me the script when you're finished, and so I did. I worked, I wrote the scene, and then you took it, and that was the latest script, and then you went to London with it, and I don't think you were going to give it back. I mean,
You took your ball and went home.
I don't remember exactly what your thinking was on that.
No, it was more of a total impasse, and I just said, the hell with this, I'm just leaving. And I got on a plane, it was the Concorde, and I went to London because I figured if they want me to come back, they don't have to ask me, but if they want me to come back, it has to be logical on the set. It can't be this conflict. And I was gone, and then they worked it out, said, okay, come back, and I've got a Concorde plane, and I came back. I was gone about 2-3 days. But it was production stuff. You know, when you become the director of a movie that had another person had hired a lot of the key people, those key people, usually half of them remain loyal to that first director, you know, so that you have all these sort of people it's like having a ship and half your crew really was loyal to the ex-captain and they're not loyal to you. So at one point I literally had to...
You fired about 18 people or something.
Yeah, well, not quite that many, and some people of them really had done wonderful things. I think one person that I regret that he was in that group, well, I won't say his name, but I also met a lot of wonderful people that had come on the show because of the previous regime, like Milena Cananero, who did these extraordinary costumes, and then I only wanted to work with Milena after that. So, you know, as with all things in life, there's a lot of good that comes from adversity as well as bad things, and there was a lot of good that came because of the weird circumstances that happened. But it is not good that the first version of the picture that was released was so truncated, and it's wonderful that now we have and the only reason it exists is because my company was always sort of interested in consumer electronics, so while I was making versions of the movie, I would always save them on Betamax tape. So about 2 years ago, I came upon the original Cotton Club cut, the version, on a video, crummy videotape, but I watched the whole thing and I was amazed with how much was taken out and how much better it was in the full version, which is really what this is. It's a little tweaked from that, but it was only that I got to see this VHS Betamax video that I understood how the picture really was better longer. And fully, not without all these cuts, and that's why I went in the project to restore it.
I do want to say we will go in just a moment to audience Q&A, so you can make your way. There is a microphone right down there in the middle, right by the orchestra pit. If you have a question, you can line up. I do want to say, since we have Zachary Hines here,
Where is Zachary?
Zachary, your father in this new restored version is just beautiful and magical, and many... I could watch Gregory and Maurice dancing all day, and all the reviews said one thing in this new version. They said the Hines brothers steal the show. Do you feel that way, Francis?
I love the Hines brothers, but you know, I feel the whole cast, and as I said, many of them lost. Bob Hoskins, who played Oni Madden, and Fred Gwynne, who played Frenchie in that extraordinary scene where he comes back and he breaks his watch.
Who wrote that scene?
They
Is that
did.
a Kennedy scene?
They did.
Okay.
They did.
it?
Big Frenchie wrote that scene.
I thought they both worked it
Well,
up.
maybe
Yeah,
so,
but Fred.
but I think, but Fred was a.
You know, a lot of people talk about directors and say, "Wow, you got great performances out of the actors." You don't get great performances out of the actors. The director is like a coach, and he's like making an environment so the actors are not afraid, and are willing to offer. So I think a good director empowers the cast to come up with their ideas and their scenes, and I always have done that, and as a result, a lot of wonderful things in this movie was the result of the actors coming up with it or suggesting it, as in that case.
Thank you. We'll go, Michael, you're right there.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you both for sharing your brilliance with us. Francis, I was curious what you learned from your two earlier musicals, Finnegan's Rainbow and One from the Heart, that informed your making of this film?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I am in a way, I am from a musical family, but also a Broadway musical comedy family. My father and my uncle were conductors of Broadway shows, some famous ones. My uncle was the conductor of The Boyfriend and introduced the 18-year-old Julie Andrews into Broadway, and then did it with My Fair Lady. So I was raised in a musical comedy kind of thing, and I always loved musicals. I did them in college when I was a theater student. I accepted doing Finnegan's Rainbow mainly to impress my family because that was such a beautiful score. It was a very terrible book, and I had a lot of difficulty in bringing that one up. Also, that was an experience with a big Hollywood production. I was a young guy, and I learned a lot about that. And I'm sure, you know, I got to work with Fred Astaire and what have you, and I know I picked up a lot of things that ultimately that I got the benefit of that experience that was in the Cotton Club. In One from the Heart, I wanted really to make a musical, but they weren't making musicals then, so it was a sort of strange musical in which the performers, Tom Waits, who's in this, and Crystal Gayle, never really were on screen singing, but they were like the songs were told in the soundtrack, because it wasn't in those days, you couldn't, you know, there's a period where you can't make musicals or you can't make westerns. There's always something you can't make. So I would say that what I learned from those shows that I put to better use later in the Cotton Club.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right here, sir.
Hi, my name is Michael Butler, and in the 1980s, I was an agent on both coasts, theatrical agent, film and TV, and I became acquainted with Roman and Sophie. We were all younger then. Now I'm 72, so I was much younger, and I was lucky enough to visit this Plaza Hotel set where you were shooting. And I met them through Tracy Reiner, Penny Marshall's daughter, whom you may have known. Anyway, I'm here in Albany, and my question is, do you know of anybody in human resources who could get me back to LA?
Oh, he took his opportunity there, Francis.
You want to go back to LA?
I really do.
It's so nice here.
Well,
You know, I haven't really been very connected with the active film business. I live in the Napa Valley, and I have, and as you know, people say to me, "Why did you leave the film industry?" And I say I didn't leave the film industry. The film industry left me.
Yeah.
You know, that they don't make one-off movies. That you have to make a movie that's a series of movies like Iron Man or something.
Right.
So I don't know anything about the LA film business at all. So I'm not a good person to give you advice on that. I'm in. If you want to know about getting in the wine business, maybe I'm.
There you go. Thank you very much. Right here, sir.
Yeah, I have a question both for Mr. Coppola and Mr. Kennedy. I was wondering, Mr. Coppola, if you could tell us what American films you've enjoyed over the past few years. And from reading press, I know you did an event much like this at the New York Film Festival, and I was wondering if you had a chance to see The Irishman. And for Mr. Kennedy, I'd like to know what novels you might have enjoyed, American novels, over the past few years.
I haven't really read novels from the past. I've just been reading Finnegan's Wake, and I started again on Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth, which was a spin-off from Finnegan's Wake. I'm reading Hemingway's To Have and Have Not from 1937.
He's a recent author.
I haven't read.
Do you know of a contemporary novelist who was a priest named James Carroll?
Yes, from Boston. Yeah,
very talented.
He was a good writer.
Very talented writer, and it's such an interesting experience to see what a priest's life is, more from the the real, like where they go to drink and what they it's always a privilege, whether it's a film or a novel, to get to see how a way of life that you're not in. For me, like for example, did you ever see that movie? What was it called? It was all shot with an iPhone in the sort of hustler section of LA. It was, what's it called? Tangerine. Did you see Tangerine?
I have, yes.
I thought that was an extraordinary film, for one, because it let you see a life that you knew nothing of, but it had wonderful humor and situations. I thought that was I must say that it's the inexpensive independent films that are the interesting films. I haven't seen many big, I haven't seen The Irishman. I'm sure I'm very proud of all of those people, and I feel like they're my, I feel involved even though I wasn't. But like Tangerine, what was the one about the guy who's on the island and a corpse blows up and he has no friends, so he makes friends with the corpse?
Swiss Army Man.
Which is called?
Swiss Army Man.
Swiss Army Man?
Have you seen Swiss
That
Army?
I have not seen, no.
That's extraordinary. I mean, so these films that just take a view of life that you would never have thought and show you something that it's almost a privilege to be allowed to be in that world that they're with. So there are, I think our world, but our country has this great wealth of talent who are struggling to make films for $300,000 or $1 million, which in the budget of a movie. In other words, the money for a big studio picture of a Marvel type picture, the money that they spell for craft service, which is the coffee in the morning, is more than the entire budget of some of these beautiful movies that are being made.
All right, thank you very much.
Justin, yeah.
Thank you. First, I want to thank you both for coming and talking to us today. This is amazing. The movie was fantastic, and thank you. Big question I have for you, Francis. Huge fan of yours for decades. I've seen the documentary Hearts of Darkness, and I saw what you went through making Apocalypse Now. Do you have any advice for first-time filmmakers? I've directed several shorts. I've been in the business doing industrials and TV, but I'm diving in and I'm going to do a feature, I've decided, in the next year or so. So is there any advice you have for that? And then a follow-up to that is, what do you think is more important, plot or the character's arc in the film?
Which do I thought, plot or character?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, what I used to say to young people who say, what's advice to get in to make a first feature, make a movie, I would always say, get married. And to women, I would say, don't get married.
Right.
Because when I was young, I was married very young, and I'm still married to my wife of now 56 years, but I was so concerned to make a home and for my family, so I wasn't out having fun and doing all the stuff you do, and I was like desperately trying to write scripts and become so I found that marriage was a big help for me because it made me, I felt responsible. I wanted them to be proud of me, and I wanted to be able to take care of them. To a woman, I say, don't get married because, you know, a young wife is expected, or I guess used to be more so, to do so many wifely duties and stuff that she's not encouraged to develop herself creatively, which we now know that with some of these wonderful, beginning with Jane Campion and these extraordinary young women, my own daughter being one of them, who make beautiful films. There were no women directors at all in the period of Hollywood, except for one who I was blessed and eternally grateful for of having as a teacher. That was Miss Arzner, Dorothy Arzner, who made many Hollywood films with Joan Crawford and the great ladies of it, Dorothy Arzner, and I was very lucky to have her be my teacher. So I knew, and that's why I always encouraged my daughter and many young women to be filmmakers, and we could name many of them. So, but seriously about, you may not want to get married, or you may be married, and I just think the most important thing is that you have to choose. And I think there's only one choice. I mean, you are the result of a mother and a father, and you are a million to one, a billion to one shot that you even got to be born. And that means you are totally a unique individual. So if you're going to make art, if you're going to make film, make it be personal. Because if you make it personal, then it will be different than what anyone else can do. And I think that's you know, you could try to be a commercial director and just do whatever's being done to be successful, but I think it's so much more interesting that you do personal work, because being that you're so unique, that work will show why you're unique, and that's what I would recommend.
Thank you
That's
so
beautiful.
much. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Francis, my name is Karen Christina, and I'm local director, and I just have a couple of things that I wanted to tell you. I've never seen the Cotton Club until today. It came out when I was a junior in high school, and I heard there were not enough black people doing black people stuff in it, so I'm glad that I waited 30 some odd years to finally see it. I was floored, so thank you so much. And, you know, going off what Justin talked about, Hearts of Darkness, I actually watched Apocalypse Now for like the umpteenth time again last night. And at the end of that documentary, you said that I'm doing this for that fat girl in the Midwest who wants to be a director. Well, this fat girl from Roosevelt, Long Island was listening, and thank you so, so much for that. Thank you so much for that.
Well, of course, the point I was trying to make is that talent comes wherever it takes root, and it could be anyone, and it is often anyone. And you know, I said that little fat girl from Ohio would be the new Mozart, and so I wasn't kidding around. If you could be Mozart, or the filmmaker equivalent of Mozart, which is what we, you know, which is always that potential. So yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Joel, and I admit, my brain was spinning trying to come up with great questions for both of you guys, because between reading Ironweed back in high school, I was fascinated by that book, Mr. Kennedy. That was sweet. And with Francis Ford Coppola, having seen your movies over these years, it's hard not to revere your work. I like your wine too, but that's another story. But I actually had my question for both of you is, did you become fascinated with like characters who treaded the law, gangsters, while you were making the movies, or maybe before? I was just curious, or did you become more fascinated afterwards?
I'm sorry, the question is where did
Fascination with gangsters, which could be a long afternoon and answer, and we're trying to get through these.
Well, it's true that all of the characters in this movie came from real people. Yeah. They weren't grouped or related like the guy who's Mad Dog Dwyer who killed the children. That was a famous incident. It wasn't the brother.
Vincent Cole.
We took.
Vincent Cole was a crazy Irishman who killed. He only
took
killed
freely
one boy.
from real people and real stories and made them components in this story. So it's all. There's all the characters in this really are derived from someone, some living, breathing person.
Thank you.
What I was associated with gangsters because I started out writing about politics in my.
We're in Albany after all.
My first novel was going to be about the political machine, but I found out that I didn't know anything about the political machine. I couldn't write about it, but I did progress on it. I decided that I was going to use Legs Diamond in it because he intersects very seriously with the political machine. But then, as I went forward, I found out that Legs Diamond, his life, and especially his life at the time when he was living in Albany, was that of a rock star. And the publicity he got when he was up here, and that he was shot 3 or 4 times in this area, it was stunning. And that hooked me into all the research, and when I was in the middle of researching Legs Diamond, I discovered the kidnapping of the politician's nephew, the O'Connell kidnapping in 1933, and I put that aside, and I wrote that as my next book afterward, and so I got hooked into more gangsters because they were involved with the politicians. And anyway, it's a long story, and I never seemed to get out of it.
Seems to be a thin line between gangsterism and politics sometimes. I don't know. But Marcia, go ahead.
Well, that was part of my point I was going to bring up. But first of all, I want to say that this was spectacular. There would be only one thing, don't clap yet, please. One thing that would have made it better, your wine. We should have all had a glass of your wine and to enjoy this. I just saw the original Cotton Club. It is, you can get it on a disc. And I have to share with you that, first of all, the casting was spectacular. But I also really feel that it holds its time and it's still just as magnificent. This was fabulous today, too. But you know, timing's everything in life, and as Paul just mentioned, we're living in an era where every hour you're hearing about gangsters and thugs. And if you really would like redemption, I would really like you to think about making Legs, the movie.
She wants you to make Legs, Bill's novel, Legs, the movie.
I didn't get it.
She'd really like you to make Legs, the movie. We may have a new collaboration.
Well,
Good idea, Marshall.
Plus the fact that we might be able to find some funding here, so think about it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Well, he was going to do this a long time ago, back in 1984, and we even went down and saw Legs' house in Cairo.
I think that's how I came to know Bill, and why I invited him to. I think it was Legs that.
Mickey Rourke sent you a copy of Legs.
So we have
he owns the house. He owns Legs, and I had the pleasure of having dinner with. Bill and Dana Friday night, and we talked about this, and we need to do that movie.
We have time for one more question, sir. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but...
Well, there's 4 people there.
Do you want to... Your people were saying we're running
Let's do it
along.
fast.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move quick.
Can you turn down the feedback?
Thank you.
Get right to the question we do right, and then we can answer all of them.
Thank you so much for entertainment in this world of noise and clutter. I had the great pleasure to work on American Gangster in a scene with Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, and Dick Gregory, who I noticed was in this film. And we, of course, had Lucas on set, and it was very much like this. The question I had was, I was involved in the sale recently of the Kenmore Club, and they're going to preserve the Rainbow Room where Cab Calloway, all these guys performed. Sinatra begged to sing there. So thank you for the lead-in. It's a perfect time to make that movie on legs and bring film to Albany. So
We didn't. They're not plants, but you got to go quickly. Why doesn't everyone step up, ask their question, and try to answer it really quickly?
I don't. Cody Masterson. Just want to ask Francis. You work with many talented actors. How does your approach differ per actor you work with? As far as like Robin Williams at one point, and then Al Pacino. How does your approach differ as far as hands-on to hands-off?
First of all, I always have a few days of rehearsal, which movies don't ever have. And I believe that every actor responds to different kind of handling, and if they're difficult, it's only because they're scared. So basically, I try to make them in that rehearsal feel like that they're well appreciated and make that fear go away. And then I don't just go over the lines, but I work more with them to help them discover the character themselves. So it's, I think a lot, like we do improv, we do theater games, we do all sorts of stuff. We don't read the lines. So that's my approach.
Thank you so much.
Mike.
Paul, my question is related to choreography. How much was on the page versus how much did you discover in rehearsal versus what shows up on screen? It just
there were about 5 choreographers. The tap choreography was all done by Henry Latang and all that. And then George Faison was one of the choreographers who did really a lot of the recreate. A lot of it was recreation of real stuff that the Cotton Club used to do. And then others were involved. And then Michael Smewinnen came in and did the Stormy Weather and Ill Wind and Arthur Mitchell from the, so there were many, many wonderfully talented choreographers, and a lot of it was derived from those numbers, those little ribald little routines, like they were all really recreation of authentic Cotton Club stuff.
Thank you.
Micah.
Hey, were there any problems on set with scenes, and how did you write your way out of them?
Problems on well, it's the other way around. The set was, I mean, the whole movie was a problem.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I always, I've had a lot of, if you saw Heart of Darkness, I've had a lot of tough movies, and that was one. Basically, I always had the cast as my ally, because I had this little period of rehearsal, a few days even, and somehow I was able to, and if you have the cast behind you, you can get through any problem.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. The last question.
Sorry, but yes, last question. So the scene, one of the last scenes where Mr. Hines is dancing, and to me, this is the first time I saw the movie, was a testament to his stamina and talent. It's one of the last scenes that is going on at the same time as the assassination. Was that all one take?
Yeah.
Or?
There's a credit for Gregory Hines. What did he call it? Tapography? Improv what? It had a funny word. Nonetheless, he did that. He invented that. You know, I was very struck in the scene with Bumpy when that character says, "I'm going to kill him with my tap shoes." And I thought that it would be great if he kills this terrible man, Dutch Schultz, who is the sweetest actor on earth, but he was really not a nice man, Dutch Schultz. And I thought when he said, "I'm going to kill him with my tap shoes," I thought that, you know, that and he did that tap choreography. Gregory did it, and he performed it as one. It was his conception, and he did it. And then I intercut it with machine guns and
Yeah.
stuff. So
That's a beautiful line. Was that a Kennedy line, Killer with the tap shoes? It sounds like a Bill Kennedy line in a way. But let me just take the privilege of the floor to ask the very last question, and then one final surprise. So there's this film you've been wanting to make since 2001. You've called it an epic on a grand scale. I read recently that you are now moving forward on that. Can you talk about Megalopolis?
Well, you know, when I was young, I had an incredible few years when I made The Godfather and had the pleasure of a big hit, which I had never known. And then I won't get into the details, but I made a second one, which I didn't want to do, and I had that be a big success, and I'd also had The Conversation. So by that point, I was pretty potent guy in the movie industry, and I had won like 5 Oscars and all that. But no one wanted to back my next movie, which was Apocalypse Now. Absolutely nobody. And I'm very blessed because I own Apocalypse Now, but the reason I own it is because nobody wanted it. And so I wanted to make it, and I ended up owning it because I went on Hawk and almost, you know, so now at age 80, I'm certainly not the hottest movie director going, and I'm not like I was then in the absolute sweet spot of a career. And my next film, nobody wants, I mean, they don't make that kind of movie anymore. They make Iron Man or Spider-Man or Batman or some man, Marvel picture. And this movie that I want to make, so it puts me very much like where I was when I ended up wanting to make Apocalypse Now and ultimately got to. So I just look at it, I look at it from the same point of view. Megalopolis is basically, it's a movie about, remember the movie The Shape of Things to Come? It was made in the 30s, it was 1934, it was a film I just adored, a Corda film. My view of the world is that the world and human civilization is going to achieve a kind of beautiful utopia like heaven on earth. That's what I see. And I know it doesn't look like it now, and I know there's a lot of bad trends and what have you, but I feel from great study and thinking and reasons that I could argue even with very bright people of why this will happen. And I would like to put that in the form of a movie that presents a kind of world of the future and the evolution into it, just like The Shape of Things to Come, which I adored as a child. I was very young when I saw it. And that so that people will see this movie, just like you saw The Cotton Club, and they say, "What? Let's do it like that. Let's have that." In other words, if I could put on film what I think, and also do the work so it's not just a pipe dream, but there's sound economic basis of how it could work and why it would work, so that if people saw this very positive view of a future that we're all going to have, and I believe we are, that they'd look at the movie and they'd say, why don't we just do that? Have a world like that? And so that's my goal, and that's what I want to do.